Hey everyone, and welcome again to another day of the Hope and Renewal podcast. I am your favorite host, Antonio Banks. And so I want to start off saying this. I've watched churches plan trips to other countries with precision, fundraisers, meetings, and matching shirts, and carefully designed social media posts announcing where they're going and who they are helping now. I've also watched needs at home get overlooked. People are hurting quietly. Families are barely making it. Souls are starving just as much as anywhere else in the world, only just without a passport stamp to prove it. So the question isn't, should we go overseas? The question is, why are we so comfortable ignoring what's right in front of us? This episode is called Global Missions, Local Neglect. It's a conversation the church can't keep avoiding. And please, before we get started, I want to make sure that you do not misunderstand me. And let me say this clearly. This is not an attack on the church. It's a reflection. I'm not speaking from bitterness. I'm speaking from observation. Yes, global missions matter. Scripture makes that clear. But so is this. We are not called to bypass our neighbors in the name of obedience. If we're bringing the gospel overseas but ignoring the broken sitting right next to us, then something is out of alignment. See, Jesus said, "Go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you." And that commanded matters. The Great Commission matters. But notice what Jesus emphasizes. Not just where we go, but who we disciple and how we live it out. See, making disciples isn't limited to plane tickets and foreign soul. It starts with obedience. It starts with presence. It starts right where we are. See, yes, we are called to reach the nations, but we are also called to teach, love, serve, and bring people to Christ right here at home. So please don't ignore them in the process. This isn't about choosing global missions over local faithfulness. It's about refusing to neglect one while celebrating the other. Jesus didn't say some nations, he said all nations. And this is where we sometimes miss it. All nations don't start across an ocean, it starts across the street. All nations includes people who look like us, people who don't, people in other countries, and people living right next door. See, Jesus wasn't narrowing the mission, he was expanding it. So when we talk about global missions, we have to be honest, because this is what we do on the Hope and Renew podcast. The Great Commission was never meant to pull us away from local faithfulness. It was meant to include it. See, you can't claim obedience to all nations while neglecting your own. Survey shows that about 2/3 of churches' mission trips go overseas, while only 1/3 happens right here in the US. Again, I want to say this to make this clear. Global missions matter. The gospel is for every nation. But what's troubling is the imbalance. And here's what's even harder to confront. Churches are often quick to ask people to tithe, yet it is uncomfortable to ask a much more complicated question. Is anyone here struggling? Is anyone in this room in need? See, we expand buildings that were never meant to be expanded, while people inside those walls are barely holding themselves together. We grow sanctuaries while shrinking compassion. We add square footage while ignoring broken homes, empty refrigerators, and silent suffering sitting in the pews. We're quick to raise money for stages, screens, and parking lots, yet we hesitate to create food pantries, emergency funds, and counseling resources, or just simply space to listen. See, the building grows, but the burden on the people doesn't get lighter. Somehow we've mastered funding construction, but struggle to fund restoration. We'll upgrade sound systems before we avoid sitting with someone in pain. We cast visions for expansion, but lose urgency for compassion. And that's the thing. Jesus never told his followers to build bigger buildings. He told him to care for people. The early church didn't measure success by square footage. They measured it by whether anyone among them lacked. So they didn't ask, how big can we grow? They asked, who still needs help? So the question isn't whether the church is growing, the question is whether the church is listening. Because a bigger building means nothing if the people inside are still starving, spiritually, emotionally, and sometimes physically. See, here's what bothers me, though, deeply. We are often quicker to engage in political debates than we are to engage in human pain. Opinions come fast when it's about elections, policies, or culture wars. Pulpits get bold, and social media gets loud. But when the conversation shifts to a family that can't afford rent, a parent skipping meals for their kids, or someone quietly battling anxiety and depression, the room gets quiet. That silence speaks volumes. See, it's easy to argue ideas than to bear burdens. Political talk costs very little. Compassion costs time, energy, patience, and presence. See, the church was never meant to be a political think tank. It was meant to be a refuge, a place where the hurting feel safe, a place where needs are ignored because they're uncomfortable, a place where people matter more than opinions. But somewhere along the way, we started defending positions more than helping people. And when the church has a louder voice in politics than it does in compassion, something is out of order. See, the thing is, when we're more energized by debates than by mercy, we've lost focus. And when people in crisis feel safer staying silent than asking the church for help, we have to ask who we've really been listening to. See, even the early church faced this. In Acts chapter 6, while the apostles were preaching and expanding ministry, widows within the church were being overlooked. And not intentionally, not maliciously, growth and outward focus led to local suffering being missed. And God didn't excuse it, He corrected it. Because spiritual success never justifies neglect. God is not impressed by how far a message travels if the people closest to us are still starving. And that's why Jesus healed on the Sabbath. He refused to let systems, schedules, or optics override compassion. He saw pain and he intervened. See, we've learned how to speak loudly without stepping closer. We've learned how to preach globally while hesitating locally. We've learned how to defend positions while avoiding pain. And scripture doesn't celebrate that, it rebukes it. The church was never meant to be a commentary booth for the world's problems. It was meant to be a refuge. God never asked us to choose between global missions and local care. He asked us to just love our neighbors. And see, sometimes that neighbor isn't sitting right next to us in the pew. until the church becomes as passionate about intervening in pain as it is about voicing opinions, we will keep missing the very people Jesus always stopped for. See, but this is not the end of the story. Hope is still here, not because the church is perfect, but because God is patient. See, throughout Scripture, God doesn't abandon his people when they drift. He calls them back. He corrects. He restores. And renewal doesn't start with buildings or budget. It starts with obedient hearts. See, hearts are willing to slow down. Hearts that are willing to be noticed. Hearts that are willing to choose compassion over convenience. The same Jesus who stopped for the woman everyone avoided, who paused for the blind man everyone tried to silence, who touched the leper others stepped away from. He is still stopping today. So when someone listens instead of arguing, when someone asks, "Are you okay?" and wait, when the church chooses presence over performance, and here's the question that remains long after this episode ends. Are we more committed to being heard or to being present? Because the moment the church starts stopping again, hope stops being something we talk about, and renewal becomes something people finally experience. And that's why hope is here, and that's why renewal is still possible.